Battle Brothers, Space Brothers, Space Marine Brothers. Today the space enemy is at our space door. And if we die this day, we die in space.
Let's do this.
Have you ever wanted to live out the fantasy of being a Gregorian space fascist in a universe that is actively hostile to common sense and ethical behavior? I mean, that would be pretty disturbing, but just think of it as a backdrop that permits all manner of excess violence, war crimes, social stratification, and genocide. You know what, we're gonna just revoke your sprue knife privileges before you hurt somebody with that. Assuming you're one of the sane people who doesn't think the Imperium are the good guys, what is BOLTGUN? Well, in simplest terms, it's a marketing team's lucid dream. It appeals to two of the most hardcore audiences who usually lack impulse control: boomershooter fans and tabletop wargamers, of which there are two types: people who enjoy painting and building the models, and the people who actually play 40k. These things are the eternal enemies of the taxman, deodorant companies, and American high schools. If you see one, don't make eye contact. Just throw a handful of Cheetos on the ground and run while they're counting. As you might be able to tell, I'm coming at this game from the perspective of someone who isn't really in either group, so think of this as a normal, high-ish functioning adult's opinion on the product. For those of you who didn't play the first Space Marine game or have no knowledge on 40k in general, I'll give a quick rundown of the setting, but be aware that most of my knowledge comes from wikis and whatever the prettiest box in the store says, so I'm probably going to get things wrong. Look, I'm sorry I wasn't raised in a basement and fed Mountain Dew intravenously. It's not my fault I actually went outside growing up. We were too poor to be inside. The basic premise of Warhammer 40k is that this is the future, magic is real, demons are made from intrusive thoughts, and the only way to get anywhere is Event Horizon style. Every race, be they human, Maoist, bastard, or fungus lad, is actively making the universe worse out of ignorance, religious zealotry, or egos so big the UN recognizes them as sovereign states. But for BOLTGUN, we only care about humanity. Catholic Nazis who worship a dead atheist because someone wrote a Bible about his clone father who just happened to be a magical 6-meter tall shapeshifter that walked around in gold armor with a flaming halo while performing miracles. As you can probably guess, when he said he wasn't a god, his loyal and devoted worshippers said he was full of shit. In the roughly 10,000 years since, half of his sons turned on him, most of the others died, and he's been a living corpse powering an interstellar lighthouse with his mind while his empire does its best to implode. In more recent history, demons tried to take over a factory planet and left behind a lot of taints and warp. The aforementioned Event Horizon hyperspace, also known as Chaos. Usually, the Imperium handles problems by sending in people en masse in order to overwhelm the enemy or bury them in corpses. But this doesn't really work when you're fighting spirits. So when the Soviet method fails, they send in the Space Marines, or in copyright-friendly terms, Astartes. These are not men. No, they're exclusively male, but I mean human. They're not merely human. They're genetically engineered and brainwashed 3-meter tall demigods wearing more armor than a Ferdinand and with all the speed of a Formula 1, Newton be damned. You are one such Superman, working with the Inquisition, who are somehow worse than the real-life equivalent, to root out any lingering traces of warp taint on the factory planet. And that's about it. Well, what did you expect? There's cults and demons everywhere. You're alone. Go get killing. Gameplay is very straightforward. You can shoot, charge, and jump, and given that you weigh more than an average Tesco customer, these are all lethal. For as much as it sells itself as retro, though, it's really more like Doom 2016 than Doom 2, just with the difficulty turned up and the complexity turned down. Everything's an arena fight. In fact, some levels are nothing but arena fights. Sure, you can avoid some enemies in some levels, but for the most part, the devs had a very clearly intended way of the player progressing, and by the Emperor, you're going to do it their way. On the bright side, you usually don't have to kill everything in the arena. This is very good because the AI can be bipolar. The game can be pretty hard on higher difficulties, at least to those of us who don't speedrun Ultra Kill on a weekly basis. If you're looking for a relaxing game, what did you expect? The title's in all caps. But the way to survive isn't that complex. You just hold down Shift and violently tickle A and D. There's also no auto map, or mini-map, or map of any kind. Calling the levels sprawling would be like saying North Korea is the Western liberal ideal, and yet I still got lost. And as for secrets, I think we should send the devs a dictionary with every word but secret blacked out. And then there's the vertical element. It sucks. If you fall and don't land in a bottomless pit that warps you back up top, you're gonna have to march back down half a level and up the other half again. In spite of being called BOLTGUN, you don't just have the titular BOLTGUN. In fact, you don't start with it. You start with a weaponized chainsaw, something very silly if you have even a basic idea of engineering, and very cool in spite of that. This isn't just a shitty backup punch either. The way it works is you hold down V, or right mouse if you're a zoomer, lock onto the enemy, rip forward, and start smacking the key to grind them into hamburger. The first actual gun you get is the and it feels like it should. A fully automatic 40mm rocket grenade launcher. It one-hits most low-level enemies, shoots straight-ish, and can take out tougher enemies well into the late game. It never feels like a backup, just a solid baseline for all the other weapons. Then there's the shotgun, a pump-action tube-fed shotgun in the 400th century. And this isn't a survivalist shotgun made to work in space Australia. It's standard issue, so why isn't it auto-loading? Or magazine fed? Why are we using shotguns in the first place? I get that the pump action is a staple of the FPS genre at this point, but we can't blame id for this. This is tabletop accurate. Yet again, the English get away with a crime against humanity. To continue with references to other retro games, there's also an overpowered double-barrel shotgun. Only it's single barrel, it shoots microwaves, and it's not a shotgun. That's a philosophical issue, and we've got practical problems to worry about. The Melta, spelled with an English accent, is a microwave cannon that melts meat, metal, and the demonic amalgamations of both. Shame you only get about 30 shots throughout the entire game, but if you want something dead fast, it's the best choice. Although for some reason, every shot takes 5 ammo, but this ammo type is only for this gun, so it makes very little sense. If you need more ways to kill things with science, the plasma gun functions on a similar principle, only instead of turning the enemy into plasma, it makes its own and force feeds it to them. It's kinda like the rocket launcher from classic Doom, but with rapid fire. However, plasma, being the most excited state of known matter, is very hot. And if you decide to go 5 rounds rapid with this, you're going to... If sauteing your own skin sounds like too much trouble, there's always the heavy bolter. Basically the titular but belt fed and with a fire rate befitting of an LMG. If you want to kill one big thing or many little thing, you can't go wrong. It does, however, make you very slow and burns ammo like oil. If you'd rather let your enemies have time to think over their impending demise, the Vengeance launcher is the way to go. It's a sticky grenade launcher with a time delay fuse, and there's no sound more satisfying than a direct hit. But if this doesn't feel like a proper boomer shooter anymore, look no further than the Unmaker. I mean the Volkite Cavalier. A very nostalgic weapon for those of us who played Doom 64. It's also the second deadliest weapon in the game and the only hit scan weapon, second only to the gravity cannon. When you use this, you're speeding up the heat death of the universe in a local area. It's the last weapon you get, has almost 0 ammo, but if you see something big or many little things that you want dead 10 seconds ago, it's the perfect choice. But all this gun with nothing to shoot wouldn't be a game. It would be a horror game. And the devs have included plenty of things to kill. Mostly it's just different flavors of Chaos cultists armed with machine guns and the odd plasma cannon. And I mean, yeah, Chaos is kind of the elemental evil, but it's not like the Imperium is perfect either. You know, on second thought, you just can't argue with a Redditor. Although they're only human by technicality, the other mortal enemies you face are Chaos Space Marines in 3.5 flavors. Vanilla, Attention Whore who got noticed, and Certified Forklift Operator. Basic Chaos Space Marines are just you, but worse, bringing only a weaker bolt gun and lots of grenade spam. Aspiring champions are the few devotees crazy enough to hope the Chaos Gods actually notice them. They are melee-focused cocaine addicts who can outrun you, and they brought a plasma cannon just in case you remember that they cannot jump. for they are white. And sometimes if you're really unlucky, after you kill them, they'll become Chaos Champions. Basically the same as before, but faster and harder hitting. Chaos Space Marine Terminators are Marines wearing a miner's rig and carrying a Browning M2. You might not take them seriously by that description alone, but clearly you've never seen what a pissed off man can do with an industrial tractor. You aren't just dealing with mortals either, as the Chaos God of Change and the Chaos God of Stagnation have sicked all manner of demons on the material plane. On the side of Change, you've got horrors, both feminine and masculine, flamers, which specialize in frying, screamers, which specialize in flying, and exalted flamers, which specialize in frying you with 11 secret herbs and spices. For stagnation, you've got toads with acid reflux, bloat drones, flying T-34s, and nurglings. These little shits exist to make you format your hard drive. They are small, weak, and die if you elbow them, but they are many, and they have ranged attacks. Everybody hates them. My suggestion to the devs is to Control-F every Nurgling and replace them with a Chaos Champion. But what kind of boomer shooter would it be without boss fights? And BOLTGUN certainly has them. There are 4 unique bosses and 15 encounters. It feels like the devs ran out of filler content and threw all these fights in just to pad out the playtime. Although I guess that is pretty authentic for a retro game. The final boss isn't any better. It's the same sorcerer you fought twice, but he has phases now. First, he has a barrier held up by a Great Unclean One, another boss you already fought, then one held up by a Lord of Change, another boss you already fought, and finally, when he ascends as the Chosen of Chaos United, his shield is held up by a lesser plague toad. Aesthetically, the game looks nice. Very PlayStation 1 or Windows 95 depending on your gamer cred. They even managed to capture the weird polygon warping at the camera edges, something most people who play Nuevo retro games wouldn't even notice or would erroneously call a bug. Though said hipsters will also be offended that the game runs in 60 frames per second and has a file size larger than this script. But all those bytes went to good use because the art direction is on point. They really nailed the diesel punk cathedral look. It also captures that iconic dystopian lack of respect for OSHA regulations. It's so spot on I get flashbacks to when someone tried to run me over with a forklift. Though sadly we don't get to see what a Gregorian forklift would actually look like, but maybe that's for the best. Some things just can't be made grimdark. I also have to give credit to the team who made the sprites, because I could be convinced they took photocopies of actual 90s miniatures and scanned them in. It's hard to describe the subtle shading and color work that the iconic heavy metal Warhammer painting technique entails, but if you've ever painted these minis, you might know what I mean. And the cutscenes, all 4 of them, look straight out of Monkey Island. LucasArts would be proud if they were longer than a late-night TV bumper. Each weapon and enemy also has a strength rating that means something. I assume these numbers make sense to tabletop goblins, but I am personally at a loss. The game's also oddly sickening, and I don't mean that morally. It's just something about the muted colors, the polygon warping, and the horrendous color filters make me regret having overcome my gag reflex. It also makes low-level enemies hard to see at times, which wouldn't be a problem if they didn't have plasma cannons. There's a concept in art direction called color value. Basically, if you scan something in black and white, would you still be able to tell what you're looking at it? And this game fails miserably. I'm sure I got a lot of the lore wrong and some of the mechanics too, and that will definitely piss off people who actually play 40k. Still, even though I have no love for Warhammer or Doom clones, the game is fun. That's an extremely subjective thing to say, but all media is subjective when you think about it. Sure, we can talk about camera angles and color theory all we want, but at the end of the day, someone is going to hate Blade Runner and love Adam Sandler movies. Still, if my mental instability jives with yours at all, give BOLTGUN a try. It's about as expensive as 2/3 of a Commissar Mini and will probably be entertaining for far longer. Now that I've said that, I'm gonna go offer some human sacrifices at the nearest warp rift. I'll definitely live longer serving chaos than after insulting a commanding officer. For any corpse worshippers left, remember that ignorance is bliss, because you'll never realize how much your own side is exploiting you and claiming it's for your own benefit.